Hello and welcome to the Rural Well. I'm Bridget and this is Loren, and we are thrilled to have you with us. Today we want to talk about step parents, not that wicked stepmom that everybody talks about in the movies, but I think we can talk about it in a much better way. Now, you might be joining us while you're waiting on a local repairman to stop by, do something at the house or in the shop. Maybe you're feeding bottle lambs. Maybe you're just putting new sheets on the bed. Whatever it might be. We are so glad that you're here because we had the well-being of rural areas like yours in mind when we were building this episode. So we know the ag industry has a lot of challenges, and we're right alongside you and cannot wait to connect and inspire one generation and legacy to the next. Loren, step parenting. That's maybe one of the very few hats you haven't worn.
No, that's true. I've never been a step parent. I've worked with a number of step families. To be honest with you, I just consider it a huge privilege because these are families who inevitably come with, other pieces. Like there's certain pieces that come with it. But what I see most often is a desire for wholeness. It can be complicated. There's still, sharing of responsibilities with ex-partners. Sometimes we deal with jealousy between ex-partners or previous relationships or comparisons. And so there's a lot of complicated factors. But what I'm most I don't know if humbled is the right word, but in awe of is the dedication I see in most of the step families that I've worked with to really make an environment where the family can thrive, regardless of the age of the stepchildren. I think sometimes when we think of step parenting, we think of young children, but we also have situations when we have our older parents who have widowed and then remarry, and so it too can be from an emotional perspective. It can be complicated, and what I see most often is this level of dedication that is to be celebrated.
Families are complicated these days, no matter what, right? And you're exactly spot on about whether it's through blood, steps, however we get there. I, through my years, have not only become a stepdaughter, but am a stepmom as well.
And you've seen both sides of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up about being adults, because so often we just associate it with kids. You don't stop being a parent just because your kids are adults. And the same goes when you're a step parent as well. And my stepmom is a sweet and kind lady. And after my dad died, we kept her. We kept her husband when she remarried, and we kept our siblings because, as far as we're concerned, we've all been together this long. We're not going anywhere now. And so when something changes, the relationships don't have to end. What I think is probably the most important lesson that I saw my stepmom make, and I tried to emulate with our kids, being a step parent is not a competition. And I just want that to sink in for a minute. You know innately in your biological children that they are your children and that they love you because of that. Sometimes when you're a step parent, you feel like you have to do better so they will choose to want to have a relationship with you. It's not a competition, because kids, and I do mean this in the respect of younger kids, they just want people in their lives who are good.
I think it's a challenge because when we enter into step relationships, there's a tendency for our own insecurities to come out. I think back to this one family I was working with, and, honestly, they said to me, I think our marriage is over. Like, I don't think we'll ever heal from this. I'm happy to say that their marriage is thriving. Their relationships are thriving. But one of the key pieces there was recognizing our own woundedness and how that impacts our ability to be in relationship with our spouse and their child. So for instance, in this case, we have a stepmom and her son, and we have a stepdad. And so when stepdad came into it, he was like, I'm going to step up. I've got to step up. And so I've got to discipline in a way that really, provides for this family. But the piece then became, it was actually his own insecurities, right? That do I have the ability to really connect with this child from a relationship perspective rather than from a kind of discipline perspective? Because certainly discipline is an act of love. I'm not trying to say that we can't discipline, but the relationship wasn't there. I always encourage people, we've got to connect and collect our children before we correct. And when we become step parents, that piece is amplified. That need to really connect is amplified, and understanding our role change. And so I'm curious, Bridget, about that. When you think about the roles you played, like before you and your husband married, as opposed to the role you played once you married, was there a lot of changes there?
There was not. And to be perfectly honest, if I followed a lot of experts' advice, our kids were 8 and 11 when we married. We probably should have waited, right? They were at that very tender time frame where maybe we shouldn't have introduced me as a parent into the whole logistical situation, but we did. And we're incredibly lucky that things went very well. I think that the kids knew that the primary disciplinarian was dad. But what he said, I followed through on. Means I didn't set a separate set of rules or expectations for them. We did those things jointly. We knew what needed to be done as a team event. That communication between the parents is very important. And we had to do that with their mom too. Now, this is where it can get sticky because sometimes as adults, we don't play nice and we have to put our kids ahead of us. So if we don't have good communications and good relationships, it's not going to help to drag the kids through it or other, married in adults, etc. We have to be good ourselves first, if that's a helpful piece of advice.
It's super helpful. And I think the piece that I'm also curious about, because you've got me thinking, is when did that start? Like, when did that transition happen? Because sometimes I think we are one way before we get married, and then we're married and we have this expectation for things to be different. And I guess what my advice, from a premarital counseling would be like, we actually need to set that standard very early in our relationship,
Yes.
have that transparency and that communication and that role definition. Like, what is my role as the stepmom potential to be? What is my role as stepmom? And is there a lot of changes that will take place? Because if you're forecasting a lot of changes, then we need to ensure that those changes are well identified and communicated.
Man, parent and step parent really have to be in great communication. Where do we stand on everything from bedtimes to just, standard discipline, to allowances, to how money is spent with and for the kids? You have to do that before you marry. Because if you think you're going to marry and then all of a sudden start setting the rules, the kids are going to be like, well, why did this change? And if it changed and they didn't like it, the blame is going to go squarely on this new person in their life. And that doesn't always give that person a fair shake.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like what you talked about bedtime routine. And I think routine is so important for kids, period. I was talking to some family, some clients actually, who's in some family situations, and trying to navigate keeping routine between the two different houses. And now I'm amazed at people who are so creative. It boggles my mind because it's so far from what I know. Certainly having having a house and the parent leaves and comes back. Like, there's just so many different ways that I hear people are trying to make this successful for their kids. And I don't think I can weigh too heavily in on that because it's certainly complicated and there's so many individual aspects that come into it. But what I can say is, did you notice the impact of maintaining routine between the two homes, or at least in your own home? How does that impact step parenting and step families or blended families? Because, we have his, hers, and ours in
Absolutely.
situations. Yeah.
It makes a difference because kids, no matter how much you think they don't like rules and consistency, they do. They show that they respond better when you are like that. And so, we try to be as consistent as we could. Now, again, you have two separate households, unless you have a house that the kids are in 24/7 and then the parents shift in and out, there's going to be some chaos between homes. But you remembered who got what for bedtimes. You remembered, who also, okay, so, Saturday mornings they got to sleep in at that house. Maybe we should do the same rule here. I mean, I know those sound like small things, but small things matter to show that consistent plan for the kids and make them feel like they're not doing something wrong.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And chores, right? Are both houses going to have chores? Because if a kid gets punished for not doing chores at my house because they don't have to do chores at the other house, well, now they feel like they've done something wrong when really it's the parents that need to fix that.
Yeah, and there is a lot of onus on parents, and I think that this is part of parenting. And I'm not saying that it's easy. Certainly, I when farmers come for counseling, it's usually like the 99th degree, right? Like we're dealing with things that are blowing up, and which is unfortunate. I wish farmers let's come earlier, okay? Like let's just have some of these discussions a little bit earlier. But if ever you have the opportunity, if you don't like your spouse's ex, I also don't want to be the first to say you guys should become best of friends, like besties to the, I've seen some of those TikTok videos and I'm like, okay, but that's unusual. But what we can agree on is we all love these kids. Like find the commonality because your spouse's ex, usually, I'm sure some people say, "Oh no, they're narcissistic." So I want to be a little bit careful. Like I recognize there's these unique situations, but they love their kids. And at one point, somebody in that relationship believed they loved one another, and so it's certainly very important if we can come to some commonality about how are we going to treat each other about the other spouse. Can we come to some agreement like we're not going to talk badly about the other spouse? We're not going to be malicious in making sure we disrupt expectations on a regular basis because that happens all the time.
Right.
I have sometimes I have the step parents start sending videos to the kids about all the presents that are waiting for them at the house, trying to make their time with the other parent rotten so that they anticipate. Like there's so many little dirty tricks. And I just would say, before you do something, take a really deep breath because in the end, you pay for it. Like in the end, when your kids grow up and are more mature, they call it. And remember, Brittany Olson talked about this on one of our previous podcasts. She was such a great representative of she said, I knew the truth then, but as I got older, I realized I will not do that to my children. And we have a responsibility to actually kind of protect one another to the best of our ability, right?
And talking badly about the other parent in front of the kids is not a way to gain and curry favor with your children.
That's right.
That's just destructive for everybody.
It is. Kids have a loyalty bond, even if their parent mistreated them. Honestly, I work with kids from hard places all the time. And even if they've come from a hurtful, abusive family, there's a loyalty, sometimes a trauma bond to that parent. So you need to be very, very careful about how you speak about those other parents involved in their lives. Yeah.
I also thought it was important. And again, a lot of this is my experience. I don't have everybody else's parenting experience, but in ours, we didn't want our kids to feel like they were being replaced by someone else. So you want to make sure that your kids understand that they're part of a family unit. And we always said things like, our kids, because it was us together. It wasn't his, or I didn't ever say my step kids. It was always just our kids because we didn't want them to feel like they had some sort of different label on them or that they were being replaced by anybody else in our lives. And I think that happens, unfortunately, a little bit too much. And that can put some rifts in a family just what you said, like Brittany remembered that when she got older. Kids don't want to remember that when they get older. They want to remember that everybody involved in their life loved them.
You know what you're really talking about is what we call a secure attachment. And
there.
and we want secure attachments for our kids no matter what the circumstance. I think sometimes we tend to think secure attachment can only happen before the age of 5. And I want to be truthful, before the age of 5, there's a lot of healthy attachment that can happen. A lot of unhealthy attachment can also happen. But what we know is that if we put these stepping stones in place for our kids at a young age, even though things may not have been optimal, we can grow them when they're older. Mm-hmm. But we can also get in the way of that. So your goal is healthy, secure attachment. And as you said, using that language like our kids, my husband and I do that when we welcome a new foster. This is my daughter. This is my son. That took for our kids of origin, like our birth children or those who were, biologically ours. I don't even like some of those terms, to be honest, but for lack of a better way of saying it, it did take some time to kind of sit down and explain to them, like, their sense of belonging and their sense of place. Although it didn't feel challenged because they saw it as it was a whole family ministry. It was a whole family undertaking to welcome new children into our family, still is. And so, I'm just so appreciative of the fact that secure attachments can still be built later on in life. So I would really encourage people who are step parents to understand your responsibility or your goal is to attach, is to build connection, build relationship. And if you're going to build relationship, we don't do that by hounding and correcting and complaining and nagging and talking badly about, their family of origin or, any of those pieces. That's not how we build relationship. And so it will take some self-discipline for some, new parents to set aside some of those pieces and say, you know what? My goal is relationship. My goal is relationship. My goal is relationship. Because it's that relationship that will carry you through the years ahead when that trust is built and those kids can trust you enough to come to you and ask questions and talk about hard things.
Having ideas and discussions like this is what helps us have better communities and as adults having good, healthy mental health. And that's what we're here for, right? These are the discussion points that we should be thinking about, whether we have stepkids, are getting them, or we don't know where life will take us. Mm-hmm. All of these things are very important for what our future may hold. All right. So on to the next.
We have a quote. Bridget, you pulled up this quote. It's unknown. So the author's unknown. Okay, I'm just going to read it and we're going to go from there. So a step parent is so much more than just a parent. They made the choice to love when they didn't have to. And again, that's we don't know the author of that. So what are your thoughts when you read that?
We often said that you couldn't have too many people who loved your kids. And we meant that, whether it was through as the fact that we came together in a marriage, and I then have 2 stepchildren, and they brought with them all of their side of the family. I brought all of mine. We have great friends who became mentors and role models for our kids. I don't think we can just say step parent alone, because there's so many people in our kids' lives, no matter how we got our kids, that are there to love them. And that is a blessing we should all be thinking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I see the piece where it says they made the choice, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, love is a choice in many circumstances, regardless of through, blood relationships or, the action. There's an old song that says love is a verb. And I think it's the action of it, And I think that my concern when I see choice, that means we have the choice to not love somebody. And I'm like, oh, it kind of hurts my heart a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm really hearing from this quote is the reality of a step parent when they choose to enter into that relationship. Kids don't have a choice to enter into those relationships. At least not really. I mean, certainly you're going to ask them, or certainly kids don't have a choice, but they are trusting the adults in their lives to love them well. And so, let's choose that. Let's choose to love them. But just as you said, like friends, family, anybody, we can't get enough love. That is so true. We can choose to surround ourselves with people who choose to love well. And what a gift that is to give to children, no matter what the circumstances are.
Oh, and that really ties into the way I want to end today. I always ask a question, and this one's a little bit more thought-provoking than just funny and cute. If you were to be gone tomorrow, what would you want people to remember you for most of all? Well, I think it's ubiquitous for us to say that we want people to remember that we loved, that we were willing to take care. You open your house to people all the time, Lauren, to those who have difficult lives, and you make them better in so many ways. But if you were to take just even that word aside, what other word do you think would really stand out for people to remember you by?
Oh man, these reflective, contemplative, because my brain goes over like, well, there's this and there's this and there's this, The word legacy comes to mind. And I think the word legacy comes to mind because I think there's so many pieces to answer that question. I don't know if I could say is there one thing, because our legacies, I think a lot of times I see some people, who are like, oh, well, I wasn't good enough to get into heaven, or, and regardless of what you believe about afterlife or whatever, but the totality of who you are is you're a person who contributed to this world. So I would love like my legacy to be part of just coming alongside people, and loving people is one of them, but like, was I the hands and feet? Like, did I actually help people, or did I just talk a talk and not actually walk a walk? So I think that would be me. I would hope that I'm remembered for being a person who stood toe to toe in a hard world. That was spoken over me. I don't know how to say that, in a way that's friendly for a podcast, but that somebody said to me, you're going to stand toe to toe in a man's world, is how the quote went. And a number of years ago, I think 2004. I think
you said it just right. You said it just
right. In 2004, I debated the former Prime Minister of Canada on a program called It's Your Turn, now with Peter Mansbridge at CBC. It was a national program. And I count that as a huge privilege, but I hope that I'm remembered for being able to stand up for the vulnerable.
I firmly believe that you will be. I don't know how we could ignore that because of all the good things that you do for many. There's a reason we started this podcast, and that was so you could share good ideas and resources for those vulnerable and for those who need it and didn't have any other place to turn for help. And look at us continue to do that today, especially your guiding light with it.
I am so uncomfortable with this part of it where people start complimenting me. And I've read that that's a really bad sign that I'm not comfortable with compliments. So I'm just going to be quiet now.
Deep breath. It's okay. Quite okay.
Okay. What about you though, Bridget? What would you want people to remember you by?
I think that I'm just going to be pretty simplistic. I hope they remember that I always took the chance to laugh. And I don't want to say that, I laughed at you or anything like that, but there's a lot of fun to be had in this life. And I tried to find as much of it as I could.
Yeah. I love that about you, actually. And that came to mind as well. When you asked the question, I was like, oh, you're so witty, that I really love that about you. Yeah. There's so much, but you know what? I think it can teach all of us. If you're a listener and you're like, oh, what's my legacy? What am, just take a moment to appreciate what you do bring to our world, because we're better because you're in it. And
yes.
And so take the time to write down a few of those ideas because you have incredible value.
I also hope that as listeners, they share their experiences in those blended family situations, step parents, step children, because as you said, not every situation is sunshine and roses, not by a long shot. But I'm hoping that people choose to reach out and share what some of their what their lives may have been like. And maybe they find some of those bright spots to reflect on as well.
It's been a pleasure. So good to chat with you, Bridget. And hey, listeners, we are so thankful for you. This podcast has become more and more rewarding because more and more of you are listening and commenting and sharing your own stories in our community. The Rural Well family is growing. So we invite you to share this podcast with your friends and with your family. And until next time, have a fantastic week.